So I think I'm going to start this session off by looking at treasure, but specifically what happens when a combat has taken place and it's finished, and during that aftermath, one of the obvious things that the adventuring party are going to do are to look at the monsters they've defeated to see if they're carrying any treasure, or is there any treasure in the room. Yeah, I'm drinking a can of Pepsi, so you might hear me just like swigging away in the background. So, orcs are the monsters that have just been defeated by the party. And they have a treasure type of P and D. So one of these letters is for the treasure that's carried by the actual monsters as individuals, and the other is the treasure type that would be found in the monster's lair. The battle did not take place in the lair of this tribe of orcs, so we'll be looking at the treasure that's carried. So I've just put a reminder for myself here as well that the treasure type that is given in the parenthesis in the rule cyclopedia corresponds with the treasure that is being carried, and the number given that's not in the letter given that's not in the parenthesis is the treasure that is in the lair. So I'm not 100% sure where I'm going with this table at the moment, but I'm kind of coming up with a table to help me sort of organize after combat has been completed, how the treasure is distributed and what treasure is there, etc. But orcs have the treasure type P carried. So here's the individual treasure types and how it's divided up. So P is here. We've got 3d8 copper pieces, no silver, no electrum, no gold, no platinum. But there is a chance. No, there's no chance of gems or jewellery either. So pretty meagre hoard carried by the orcs. So just kind of going with it, I'm just sort of developing this in an ad hoc way to see how we get and whether, any rules might emerge from this, which will be great for soloing through adventures. So 3 orcs, all carrying treasure type P, and now I can sort of, they're not in the lair, so they've got no treasure types in this column. I can roll for the individual results of each orc. So I think the assumption would be, I don't think any kind of like roll to determine whether the party find the treasure that's being carried or bother to look for it would be, it wouldn't be necessary, because I feel like, old school D&D, this is the bread and butter of why a dungeon delve would occur. At the end of the day, this is what they're looking for. They're gonna search the corpses of their slain enemies to see if they can retrieve any treasure. I don't think that after combat any sort of thought needs to go into that. It would be an action that would be presumed, in my opinion. So I have started to put this in my own solo rulebook. When the combat is finished, check the defeated monster's treasure type, carried treasure will automatically be retrieved by the party if they are able to do so. They could well be situations where they're not able to do so. They may need to flee from some form of danger, so they wouldn't have time to get the treasure. So I've picked out 3 8-sided die, and I'll do 3 rolls altogether for the 3 orcs that were defeated. Here we go. So it's 14 is the first roll. 14 again. $18 for the last one. I kind of thought it'd be neat to have a calculator on screen. Hopefully that is showing up. Yeah, I believe it is showing up. So 14 times 2 plus a further 18 is 46 copper pieces in total. You'll see I'm obviously quite slow and bad at maths. I feel like it's quite a necessity when it comes to D&D is being good at maths, but I'm not the best. I'm not the quickest thinker either, so you'll have to bear with me on that one. So there's our 46 copper piece total. However, the orcs were actually they had a train cart with them, and some prisoners that they'd taken as slaves, and the slaves and the cart had spoils that which included treasure and various valuables and supplies that the orcs were taking back to their lair when they encountered the party. So there will be some extra stuff. So just for some context, the way that I work this out is I have what like a bestiary in my rule set, and just to explain this, I'll read the text that I wrote about it. So it's important to keep some kind of record of the monsters in the D&D world, so their general behavior as well as how they organize themselves can be referenced before an encounter is handled. The monster lists in the D&D rules cyclopedia is a good example of this. This information should be consulted in a BECMI or BECMI, however you want to say it, D&D game. However, some behavior-specific rules adapted for solo play may be a desirable accompaniment. A few examples are given below. It is recommended that you set up your own bestiary of similar solo mechanics to help you create more realistic encounters with monsters. So this is what I've written in my rule book. This is the rule, the mechanic that I came up with. And orcs is the only monster that I've covered so far. So I dug through various rule books. One in particular was the AD&D Dungeon Master's Guide, and I just tried to gather various bits of information about orcs and how I want to portray them in my campaign, and what unique rules they might bring to that I could add to my rule set to make solo gaming more interesting when it comes to encountering orcs. And this is what I came up with. There is a chance that orcs encountered are members of a previously encountered tribe. Roll on the questions with a yes or no answer table, which is basically like one of my oracles that I use, to find out if they've been encountered before, basically. If it is So then randomly determine which tribe they belong to. When encountering several orcs, there is a 1 in 6 chance they will quarrel with each other because they are quite quarrelsome creatures. There is also a chance, this is where the interesting bit is here, when encountering wandering orcs, which the party did, that they will be escorting a train of carts and slaves to bring supplies and loot to their chief or a stronger tribe of orcs. And then I came up with this table to determine, there was a 5% chance of a train with one cart. And I rolled, I think it was like 3%. So the wandering orcs were pulling a cart of loot, and they had a certain number of slaves with them and an orc leader, but no sub chief. So at this point, I can use this information to calculate what treasure was on that cart, and that treasure will now be retrievable by the party. I'll also need to handle what happens with the slaves that were captured. So it's actually sometime during the sixth turn in the game when they encountered the orcs. I'm just looking back at my adventure journal to find out what I generated in terms of the cart. So I wrote through the remains of the door. Excuse my coughing, by the way. Through the remains of the door, in the darkness, on the edge of the torchlight, 3 orcs are just coming into view, escorting what appears to be a train of carts full of supplies and loot. There are also 4 slaves bearing further spoils. One of the 3 orcs leads the train. He appears to be in charge of the group. His countenance is hard, his presence large. So that implies there was several carts. I'm pretty sure that there can only be one. So I've just written that badly. So a quick edit. It's what appears to be a cart full of supplies and loot. That's better. So further expanding my table of treasure types retrieved, I've added another column for other treasure, which will cover the cart and the 4 slaves. So this is just a work in progress. So it might seem a bit convoluted the way that I've organized this information, but I just keep iterating over these things until they start to take shape. I try to make them more intuitive as time goes on. So let's have a look here. Number of carts, number of slaves. Goods per cart is 1d4 times 10 gold. So I need to grab a d4. I always find d4s are the hardest to find when you've got a box full of dice, because they have a habit. I don't know if it's because of their pyramid shape. They seem to have a habit of sinking to the bottom of the pile of dice. But I found one. So 1d4 is 3. So 30 gold pieces altogether in the cart. And that's not 30 gold pieces. It's 30. It's spoils that equate to a value of 30 gold pieces. So the slaves, there's 4 of them. And they have 1d4 gold pieces each. I'm not going to dig around for 4d4s. I'm just going to roll 4 separately. I think that'll be easier. So 3, 2, 3, 1. So that's 9 altogether. Or like this, 3, 2, 3, 1. And that's gold pieces, isn't it? Excellent. So here's where it gets complicated, and D&D is indeed a complicated game when it comes to trying to calculate things and stay true to the rules and the spirit of the game. Try not to break the system. I do believe in trying to stick to the rules. I only fill in gaps where rules are silent rather than attempt to replace rules, because when I'm playing solo, I want to feel as though I'm actually playing the game, not some other game that is like a watered down version or an altered version of it. I want to well and truly feel in the spirit of the game and immerse myself in that system as accurately as possible. So that's how I do things. So we know what these encumbrances are, because in basic BECMI D&D, the measurement of encumbrance is CN, and that corresponds to the actual coins themselves. But wherever we don't have coins, in this case, we've got loot. We need to figure out how much of a how difficult it would be to transport this loot. I don't think that if there's all kinds of statuettes and large gold plates and whatever the kind of the loot is, it might be too difficult to carry. So we're going to have to try and determine what the situation is. And again, this is going to call for some thought on how this can be implemented, and then that will obviously create another rule that I will put in my solo rules booklet. So we'll see what happens here. So I think in this particular instance, I think I'm gonna probably come away from my computer and do some research, and probably the first place I'm going to look is probably the AD&D Dungeon Master's Guide, because this to me is absolutely the first book that I look at, apart from the rule book for the edition that I'm playing. But if that edition does not give me the information I need to make a ruling, then the first place I look is the AD&D Dungeon Master's Guide. I think it's potentially the best D&D book ever written, because it's just an absolute abundant source of useful information. So I think I'm probably going to make myself a nice cup of tea, and I'm going to lay down, relax, get my AD&D DMG out, and have a dig through that and see what I can find.